Alright, to follow along with this video, go to www.thctrust.org. If you don't have an account already, click this link and create a free account. If you have an account, to follow along today, you have to have a subscription, access to the advanced topics. Today we're under the personal status correction menu. So you'll go down to the right side of the website, click this link that says personal status correction. And today we're going to talk about the affidavit to correct errors on the certificate of live birth as relate to capacity to title, hold, and control your estate and your affairs. So to follow along, the actual document that I'm going to have on the screen here that I'm going to be discussing, it'll be under Step 5, County Recordings and Affidavits. I changed the title of Step 5, but it's the same things. And I put this here as Step 1. It's the affidavit to correct birth records. So there will be a PDF and a Word document right here. You can click it to follow along in this video. And before we get started, I'll say again, if you would like to support what we do, the best way to support is just get a yearly subscription and membership, or a yearly subscription, which is going to really be longer than a year. That's going to give you access to all the templates and anything that I talk about that I have a template for. That's going to give you access to it, priority answers to emails and questions and things like that. You can also do it on the monthly $32 per month, but the best value is to go ahead and do the yearly subscription, and it works better for us also. That being said, let's get into the topic. Before you can claim an estate, before you can claim title to the estate, you have to overcome the dispositions that have been put in place. And these dispositions are set up to keep you in a default status of being incompetent, a minor, or otherwise incapable of controlling and administering your own affairs, property, and estate, right? So let me scroll to the top here. When you do your research in your states, codes, and the laws and everything, look up these words: what a ward is, what a guardian is, what a conservator is, what a protector is, what an administrator is. And when you look these terms up, it's going to take you into maybe the probate court, and it's going to start discussing estates. Now, one thing that I want you to consider, according to what I see, estates are not just for decedents or those who have passed form. An estate was created when you were born. How did that happen? Because when you were born and they completed the birth record, if you look at the birth certificate, they have a certain date on there when it says date received. This is the date that they received the property, or the date when they received the registration. That is the date that a trust was created. A trust for the estate of the infant, right? So that is an infant's estate, or let's just say it is an estate. It's not necessarily a decedent's estate. And what an estate really is a property holding. So we know they're not using silver or gold as far as money. What facilitates commerce and generates the value is the securitizing or the leveraging of assets on the books of custodians. And the registration of the infant's estate is an asset. So to better understand that, look up those terms. And most importantly, we see here is under Ohio Revised Statute 3109.01, it's going to talk about the age of majority. And when you look up all of these things and you research how this is all set up, how the state administers your property, you're going to realize that the main disposition that keeps a man from owning or having control of his affairs and property is he has to make a claim and be of the age of majority, right? So this is why you're going to see in all of these affidavits, whether it's the affidavit to correct information on the birth record, or whether it's the affidavit claim of beneficial ownership over the estate, that we're always going to make it clear that we are above the age of majority. That's, one disposition that has to be corrected. So this is in Ohio Revised Statute 3705.125, and it's called Prima Facie evidence. And there's other places you can read this, but I'm going to highlight this part right here. Let me read the whole thing first. A new birth record or foreign birth record and any certified or exact copy of the new birth record or foreign birth record, when properly authenticated by a duly authorized person, shall be prima facie evidence in all courts and places of the facts stated in the new birth record or foreign birth record. What I want you to understand is that all certificates, the information stated in the certificate is prima facie evidence of the facts in all courts, right? So, and I get real meticulous when I look at this stuff and even when I think about this stuff. So it really made it clear to me, or it made it significant to me, that the errors on the certificate of live birth are still considered prima facie evidence of the facts that they state. So I'm going to explain what that means, because when I look at my certificate of live birth, that's the long form, the one that's actually signed by the physician, and it shows the date that the property was received. It's actually the whole trust instrument itself. It shows the creation of the trust on the instrument as you learn how to read it. The problem with it is my family name, which is Moore, is written in all capital letters, right? That denotes one who's lost their capacity. So somebody may tell you, oh, that's just the way that they did it, or that's just the way that it was written. It doesn't mean anything. Well, they're telling you in their code that what's written on the certificate is prima facie evidence of the facts, and this is how the court is going to determine it. So I can't accept that, oh, it's just written there. Now, if you want to, in this affidavit to correct the record, and I encourage everybody to do it, go look up these terms that I put down here under this footnote reference. To capitalize, to take advantage of, right? They're capitalizing your last name. How are they taking advantage? Well, it's a financial advantage. Civil little mortuus, which is defined in Black's Law Dictionary the third, the condition of one who has lost his civil rights and capacities and is accounted dead in the law. And then you can look up capitis diminutio, a diminishing or abridgment of personality, a loss or curtailment of a man's status. And you can go into the different types of capitis diminutio media, capitis diminutio maxima, capitis diminutio minima. And when you go and read these things, it's going to talk about the loss of status. And when you read it, you're going to see that a man's family ties, his religion, right? His national identity, all of these things make up one's full capacities to contract and have rights. So you have to understand. So then you have to consider that being an indigenous American under an entirely different religious system, being adopted into a Christian family or a Christian system, has an effect and an impact on the political and civil capacities or the rights of that person. So we've had slavery, we've had being deprived of nationality and birthright, and yes, all this doesn't apply to everybody. And just numerous ways that rights have been deprived from people. So I can't prove to you that the reason, let me put it like this, I'm not going to say I can't prove to you. Prima facie evidence of the facts is what it is. You know what I'm saying? So I can't, it's not my position. Well, I'm just going to leave it alone. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. It's not um, the law doesn't require these custodians or beneficiaries to understand what you're trying to do. So what I'm saying is, just because they don't understand what you're trying to do, if this affects your rights, you still have to get it done, or you have to get a satisfactory resolve. So I'll try to touch on that more, but let me go ahead and read through this affidavit. Now, you got to read your state statutes and codes, because what we're trying to do is correct all the records, that deal with our status. And in this particular instant, I'm correcting a record where the prima facie evidence shows that I have a diminished capacity, because that's damaging and that's injurious, or it causes injury to me. Let me put it that way, right? Because I'm supposed to be entitled to fairness and equal protection of law. At least that's what's represented to me. So again, on my certificate of live birth, my family name is written in all capital letters. And to me, that is a code, right? Look at how that could operate. You wouldn't know. Anywhere where you give that birth certificate to someone, that all capital letters could mean he's African American, he's black. It could mean that. And honestly, I can't tell you, I have, if you read the different types of capitis diminutio media, it'll kind of define what type of loss of status that is. But remember, this originated in Rome. Now we're under some type of newer type of system, so it's not so clear what writing that in all caps means. What type of loss of status? Is it a specific code that says this person handing you the certificate is still an ignorant, incompetent slave, and he has no rights? So again, at least in a court of law, or excuse me, at least in any court, according to the statute, the information on the face of the certificate is prima facie evidence of the facts stated therein. So I'm going to have the capacity corrected. So let's read. Also, first, I want to show you something basic and simple. Ohio Revised Code, here we go, 3705.22. Here it is, 3705.22. Birth certificate to amend or to correct errors. I'm pointing this out to you because this is why you have to comb through your state code, because your doorways that you have to go in are written there. Again, we're not going to all have the same dispositions. I've seen many certificates of live birth, the one with the particulars and the physician's signature. I've seen many of them written in the proper case format. And then I've seen a few of them here and there written either in all caps or with just the last name all caps, which is a diminishing of capacity and status. So in personal status correction, what we're doing right here is the grain of sand that starts the avalanche. Because once we correct the prima facie evidence on the record that shows that the estate is of one who is incapable or incompetent, once we correct that, now we can go into the probate court and have our will and our trusts validated that direct the estate, how it's supposed to be titled, how it's supposed to be held, right? Which is a matter of, first, you have to correct the competency issue. So, birth certificate to amend or to correct errors. Whenever it is alleged that the facts stated in any birth, fetal, death, or death record filed in the Department of Health are not true, the director may require satisfactory evidence to be presented in the form of affidavits. So, right, they have prima facie evidence on the certificate, but the evidence can be corrected with affidavits. So you can read the rest of that, and this is just showing you the buildup. And this is, again, I'm digging in Ohio revised statutes right now, because the certificate of live birth that relates to my birth is in Ohio, and this is where I want to deal with the estate. Because once again, when you were born, they completed the registration, and the delivery was treated as property received. The signature by the physician on your certificate of live birth with the date received is evidence that an estate was created for an infant state. An infant's estate was created under that registration number, right? So any proceeds, interests, securities that was created that relate to that estate, I believe, is your property. And what separates you from being able to hold title or vest interest in that property is capacity in a large part. So this is why we want to deal with the capacity, which according to them is you're a minor, so the only capacity issue is, are you of the age of majority? The only real way to correct that on the record is to have that in an affidavit. So we're going to find that again in all of our affidavits. Now let's just go ahead and read through this. Now, last thing I'll say is when you do these affidavits to correct records, don't go way off the mark. You know, you're going to see that I added some other things in here that may not be specific to correcting the errors in the record, but it was important to have on the record. But if you go way too far, you're going to get ignored. So just be precise, stick to the point. The birth record itself deals with legal attributes of the person, right? So that's why I added some of these other things in here that deal with my Moorish American nationality and identity, the use of the titles Els and Beys, because this deals with the customary law, the treaty-based law, and it's these religious connections and family connections that completely restore the lost capacities of the man, you know, if that makes sense. So anyway, this is just a guide, and you cannot, when you're doing your own personal status correction, copy this affidavit verbatim. This is to give you an idea of the things that need to be stated. And more importantly, this is offered to those that are very in-depth in their research to give me constructive feedback, because I'm not representing that this is everything. You know, I'm a student too, and there may be things that I've stated in these affidavits that don't need to be said, or there may be things that critical, important things that I overlooked that someone can alert me to so that we can make this precise. I know you're going to get something out of this lesson because I put a lot of hours and weeks of research in it, but again, I encourage you, if it's on the topic and specific to what we're doing, give me the feedback, the constructive feedback, so I can go back in and correct these templates, if you will. Now, lastly, you're going to see there's a little back and forth in this affidavit. Sometimes I'm stating facts like, I am the living man created in God's image, or I am competent to state the matter set forth here. And then other times I might be saying the affiant instead of I am. So usually affidavits in common law are written as the affiant, but honestly, I still have to go do that specific research and see, is there anything wrong with stating the facts in the first person, excuse me, such as I am capable of contracting, I am under no legal disability, or is there a specific reason, you know, in law or for whatever reason, why we want to speak in the terms of the affiant. So before I submit this affidavit to have the record corrected, I will already have came to a resolution on that, so I'm asking you to take it into consideration. This affidavit isn't complete, but it's just to give you an idea of the claims that we're making, but just know that it's not written exactly the way it needs to be. Now, the important part is really what I have in the yellow here is that we want them to correct the records. So let me just go ahead and we'll just read from the top real quick. I've overstated some things in here. You know, when it comes to these affidavits, it's always a thing with me. Like, you know, you got this standard language that needs to be in there, but then you don't want to make it too long with extra stuff that doesn't need to be in there. So all these things have to be considered. Ideally, most legal scholars I've heard would tell you that you want to be short, concise, and as precise as possible. There's no need to have 3 and 4. Well, I'm not going to put a number on it, but I think when you start getting 6 and 7 page affidavits, it's too much. If I could get it all on 1 page or 2 pages, I'm content with that, because I don't want it to be so long that they can misconstrue what you're saying and say, well, we don't do that here, or we don't understand that, or they try to make you out to be competent. If you're competent, you can get the information out quick in a precise precise manner. So let's read over this. I, John, of the family Doe, the affiant, am familiar with the facts recited. I am the living man in God's image with his spirit, and the facts stated herein are true, correct, and if called upon, affiant will testify to their veracity. See, I switched from I, and now I'm talking about affiant. Can't do that. I am of the age of majority and above the age of 18 years. You have to look up what the age of majority is in your state. And this is one of the dispositions. It's the main disposition of being able to be in control of your affairs or your property. So we want to state positively in an affirmation that we are above the age of majority. I am competent to state the matter set forth. I have the mental capacity to decide in accord with my own will and values. Just in case this is in a probate court, I'm talking about my own will. I am under no legal disability. I am capable of contracting. My appellation is John Alex Doe L. My title L represents my Moorish American nationality as acknowledged in Resolution 75. And you'll see I have a reference down here. Resolution 75 is a self-authenticating record in the United States that recognizes the customary titles of L and Bey and the national and family ties of Moorish Americans. So this is aiding in restoring the capacity, that which is lost, right? But this is not really, so this is a little subtle thing in the affidavit, but it's necessary because we're dealing with a record that's talking about the particulars of the estate. So this is necessary. And, but the way that we're really getting it in there is we're focused on, more importantly, what I have highlighted here, correcting the name, which is written in all capitals on the certificate of live birth. I have here my religion is Islamism. I want to do some research on this. Man, I think I'm gonna take this out. We don't need to put what our religion is in here. But realistically, I think anciently religion was tied with nationality, right? So things are different now because the indigenous people have been adopted into American and Christian systems, which is, not really that's not really in their origin. So it's kind of like an adoption that takes place, and this has an effect on your capacity and rights. So all of that is being considered. You have to be aware of this, because when you do these type of affidavits based off of what's in your record and your certificates and your circumstances, you may have to state or do some things differently. This is where you come in and you express things, and this is where you should demonstrate your competence. Okay. I am an American citizen. So I'm putting that in there too. You're not going to put me in a sovereign citizen category. I'm an American citizen. I make these claims sui juris of my own right, possessing full social and civil rights, and not under any legal disability. I'm the offspring of Albert Doe and Anna Doe. I am the living beneficiary of the minor account / public trust created May 30th, 1979 under registration number 123456789. The creation date, again, to me, that is the date when it says date received. That's written on a certificate of live birth. That's the date that the trust was created, that the trust estate was created, because a trust holds property. Property is estate that's being held until you're of the age of majority, right? And the age of majority, once again, is an important claim, and that claim is made in this record. I hereby request this notice and demand for a correction be placed on the record for correcting stated information on the certificate that is not true, as follows. The name Moore is represented in all capitals on the attached certificate of live birth, and this denotes a condition of one who has lost his civil rights and capacities and is accounted dead in the law. See civil liter mortuus. And then you could go down here to the footnote, and I've put the definition of capitalize, which is to take advantage of, civil liter mortuus, and all the different types of capitis diminutio, which you also have to look up. And I did this because, let me finish reading it first. Such representation is false and is a prejudice to my rights, and including that of equal protection in law. The misrepresentation of my family name causes injury and prejudice to my rights. I am requesting and therefore instructing that a correction or annotation be made to change or cause the family name on the record to be corrected to more, in the proper case sense. Now, I made a conscious decision when I wrote this, not just to say correct it from this to this, but to go into the reason why, because now I'm beginning to demonstrate on the record that, the failure to correct this is basically supporting a class system, which is a system to deprive one of rights, property, and is supportive of slavery, which is violation of constitutions. There's all types of laws and constitutional positions that you can take of why you're entitled to this. But more importantly, and basically, you really have the statute that we looked at earlier that says they have to do this. Now, so you see how, where's that statute? Right here, 3705.22. Now, you have to be real precise because, I'm not one that believes that you have to have the secret handshake to get through the door. I believe with competence and the proper navigation, you can get through these doors. I spoke about in the last video, which is very important because this is building on top of it. When you're navigating, you have to correct these records. You really only have enforcement against constitutional officers. And those, you're going to always find a constitutional officer in the path of what you're doing. Those officers have the oath of office, which is your security agreement, and these are the rights that you can expect to have enforced because they've taken a public oath, which your notice in acceptance on that, if it comes to that, is now a private contract, right? Let's say you have a private enforceable right, so you can, when these things that deal with your rights are to be corrected, your constitutional oath with a public fiduciary is the only way you can really get this stuff done and have it enforced. So I hope you see how that all ties and builds together. Because if these people have taken secret oaths or if they have some other agenda, then it's going to become clear, right? It's going to become clear when you are real clear with your affidavit. So I was saying that to say this is why I not only said correct this all capital, I went into define what it means, that is specifically dealing with the loss of capacity, which is incorrect, and I need this corrected. So now no one can make the claim of, oh, that's just a birth certificate, because I already took it further. I'm saying it's not a birth certificate, and I'm showing you exactly what it is. Now I'm forcing you to either do your job and correct the record, which is in alignment with the oath that you took, or you can demonstrate what side you're really on and who you really are by arguing against the facts that have been laid out in the affidavit, right? So I hope that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video.